We're draining the radiator on a 126 prior to replacing the condenser, our parallel flow condenser job. We need to pull a radiator out of this thing in order to replace the condenser. So to drain it, there's just a little drain plug underneath. It's usually blue, and you just take it out with a short stubby screwdriver. And so that's the very first thing we need to do, is get the radiator out of it. We'll show you how to do the rest of it. Now, we've taken the radiator out of this 126, and now we want to pull the condenser off. Of course, we have to get the system flat. We have to get the Freon out of it. And originally, this particular model had R12 in it, so I would recommend very highly that, at least in the United States, you take this to a specialist who can evacuate the system and suck all the R12 out of there. We've already had that done. The system should be flat, so we don't have any Freon left in it. And the reason I say it is because we're about to break these lines loose, and you would be in for a real surprise if you cracked these lines and the system had Freon. We got to take two lines off, here and here. We're going to disconnect these lines with a flat system, and then we're going to pull the condenser out. And we're just going to leave the fan and horn assembly on here. And what we're going to do to pull the condenser out is just, it's real easy. We remove these two little clips up here at the top, and it should just come right out. So let's start with, I've got a 17 and a 19 millimeter to loosen these first two lines. That loosens the small line here. I've got a pair of dikes to cut that tie wrap for the fan. That line off. Then I want to pull the other line off. Now these are both 27 millimeter, and I didn't have two of them, so I'm going to have to use a crescent to back up one of these. We want to get these lines off, and then we'll pull this condenser out of here. And now that we've got the lines off, there's just two clips that hold this condenser on there. So if we remove them, it's almost like removing the radiator, you see. So I can just tilt this oil cooler back, and that puppy is mounted like that, and it should just come right out of there. Now Gordon had to stop filming for a moment to help me, so it might help you if you have a friend for just a few minutes to help you get this out of there. All it does is it tilts back and lifts out, and it's got two pins underneath the bottom, just like the radiator is just pinned down in there, and that's the way it's mounted. But Gordon had to help me hold this oil cooler back so that I could get this piece right here out from under. And so that's what he was doing. That's why we didn't film actually lifting it out of there. But we didn't want to disconnect that oil cooler. That's a mess to have all that oil running everywhere. So we want to keep that connected. Now, if you didn't happen to notice, this thing ended up being flush with this panel right here. So as best we can, we want to mount our new parallel flow condenser in such a way that, again, it's flush. And we left the fan in there so that we could get a reference point there too. So you see, we didn't have to pull the fan and the horn mechanism out as long as we take this radiator out. Now what we want to do is set up the thing to mount it, and then of course we'll show you how to connect those lines. So these parallel flow condensers you would really be happy with. These serial passes just aren't very efficient in terms of their heat exchange capability. We've done the same thing to the 123s, and the difference is just amazing. Okay, now as a part of the mounting process for this condenser, we need to mount one of the hoses to the dryer. And we've already taken the little hose off the dryer that came off the condenser. You can see it's right underneath the big hose. So this hose and this hose are the ones that we need to change. Now we screwed a 90-degree fitting on this dryer. And the dryer, we took the two sheet metal screws out because we need to rotate it a little bit so that we can get the hose pointed exactly down into the hole where we want it to go. We want it to come right under here. So you got to angle that little thing down. So what we're going to do is it rotates, oh, I don't know, it looks like it's rotated about 10 or 15 degrees. You see, we're just going to, we've marked and we're going to drill some new holes into the sheet metal and remount that dryer such that it rotates. Now we don't have to take this line off because it's flexible enough. We just want to rotate it like that a little bit so we can get this 90-degree fitting on there. Now we've pulled out the radiator and we're going to mount this new condenser, and the first thing we had to do is make a lot of measurements and build some brackets. We're going to hold it with 3 custom-made little brackets, and the first one we'll measure them out in case you want to do this yourself and show you at least what we did. The holes in the condenser that we use are 5/8 inch apart, so the distance between these 2 holes is 5/8 of an inch. There's nothing especially critical about the width of this piece of material. It happens to be 1.5 inches, and it's just a piece of 90-degree material that we had. But anyway, these 2 holes are 5/8 of an inch apart on center, and by the way, every one of the holes that I'm using is just a standard 1/4 inch drill. Now the piece of bracket that we had already had 2 little holes in it, so don't pay attention to those. What you want is that hole. That hole is also 1/4 of an inch, and it is right at 2 inches from the edge of that 90. So if we measure from the 90 to that hole, it's 2 inches to that center. So that's one bracket. And
how far from here to here?
And this distance right here from the edge of that bracket to there is 1 7/8. Okay, now this has to be really close because these holes can't be very far from the edge of this piece of metal, and you'll see why when you look at that condenser. They've got to be fairly close, and they ought to be lined up, but they don't have to be perfect. We've got a little slop in our measurements here, so once it bolts up it gets tight. This is just a piece of metal, again 1/4 inch holes. The only critical part about this is you just need a metal strap, and those are 1 3/8. So those on center are 1 3/8. So that's only critical about that little piece of strap. And then this one, again, it's 1/4 inch holes. The critical dimension to here is the offset. It's 1.5 inch offset, so the distance is 1.5 inches here. And then we have 1/4 inch holes on either end of that 1/4 inch offset. From that bend right there, that hole is, well, it looks like it's right at between 3/4 and 7/8 of an inch. Again, it's not very critical. It could probably go between 3/4 and 7/8. It could go either distance. And then this hole from the edge of that bend looks like it's about, what is it, about, oh, it looks like it's about 3/8 of an inch. 3/8 of an inch from the center of the bend to the hole. And then the distance between the 2 holes looks like it's just over 2 inches, or I'm sorry, just under 2 inches, 1 7/8. Anyway, if you order a kit from us, we'll make the brackets in such a way that they work. So you need 3 brackets like that, and then we need 1 bolt. We'll show you. It's a standard metric. I don't know, I think it's a 10 millimeter, but I'm not sure. I'll have to measure that one. It goes through a hole that already exists in a bracket, and these are just little 8 millimeter bolts. They're just mounting bolts. Any size would work, but they go through the 1/4 inch holes. The condenser that we're going to use is a Max Air, and there's the number on it, 52612-0437C. If we look at it, you can see that it's a generic kind of a parallel flow condenser, and we're going to use the straps that exist on either end of it to mount it. And so if we look at it, you got to pay attention. These 1 hole, the input side, what we should use for the input where the hot gas goes in, is larger than where the liquid line comes out. So we want to take advantage of gravity. So we want the hot gas to come in the top and the liquid to pour out the bottom. So we want to mount the large hole up and the smaller hole down. And as it happens, we choose to mount the ports on the passenger side of the car instead of the driver's side the way the original condenser was, and that's just for the ease of getting the hoses over there where we want them. So now let's go and mount this thing. We'll show you what it looks like after it gets mounted. The brackets, by the way, are going to go like this. We're going to mount this bracket here, and we'll show you the hole. We're going to mount this bracket here, and we'll show you the holes that we used. And we're going to mount this bracket down here like that. So let's go look at how it looks when it gets mounted. Okay, if we look now at how we mounted this thing, we're using a little 8mm metric screws to attach to the side of the condenser, but it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th hole down, the 6th and the 7th hole, we put our bigger bracket. Now also notice that we've rearranged a little bit the position of this, not very much, but this hose, and we've got a special fitting made for this, and we've rerouted it, moved it just a little bit in such a way that we could put a stove bolt through, a 1/4-inch stove bolt through a bracket that already exists. See it right here, and it's got a round head on it so that it doesn't interfere with anything. And then it fit right through our bracket hole, but also we mounted this hose. There was a hole in that bracket already, and if you look back in there with the camera, you can see it right here. So it's right underneath the little clip that holds the electrical connection, the little electrical clip on for the fan, this thing. So that bracket existed, and we're going to hook that back up, of course, but there was a hole in that bracket already. So we put our 1/4-inch stove bolt through that hole and bolted to that. So that's all we did on this side. We'll show you the hose connections in a minute. Let's look at the rest of the bracketing. On the passenger side of the car, we put 2 brackets. One bracket we showed you on the workbench is on the top, and we had to drill a hole in this thing, 1/4-inch hole, and it's about, it's 1/4 of an inch up from the lip of this, and you can see that there's a little indentation. We put it right there, right in the middle of there, a little 1/4-inch hole right there, and it's just a 1/4 inch up from the bottom of this metal piece. And then down below, with that offset bracket, we mounted it, you see, to the condenser right here, and we could count the holes, but let's see. In terms of holes up, it's the 3rd hole up from this bottom connection in terms of where the gas comes out, or the liquid comes out. But you see, we're using a bolt that we're mounting the bolt to this bracket right here that already existed, and there's a tapped hole in that bracket. There's already a threaded connection available to us, so we just put the bolt that fits into that hole already. And so that particular hole we didn't drill in this bracket. It already exists, and we haven't tightened it up, but you can see that when we tighten it up, it'll be the last thing that we have to do in terms of mounting the thing. Now you'll notice that it's mounted just about flush on the inside. If we show the camera on the inside, our condenser ends up being flush with this piece right here. And of course it runs up and down in a very parallel flow to the front of the car. I'm sorry, in a very, parallel to the, perpendicular actually to the front of the car. And if we look at it from the outside, it's flush up against our fan bracket right here. So the thickness of the condenser is such that it ends up just being flush with that bracket. And when we finish mounting it and about to tighten this up, you'll see how sturdy it all is. And then the last thing is to hook up the hoses. But you see, you couldn't move it in any way. It's just as solid as it can be. And it's positioned in such a way that it gets good fan action. And of course, we'll hook up the rest of it as we go, the rest of the hoses and of course the fan connection. Okay, now let's do the final bit and show you what the hoses look like when they're mounted. As you recall, what we said we were going to do is just leave this high side fitting and adapt to it, and that's exactly what we did. So we left this pipe sticking through this hole and we mounted it to that bracket so it's real good and solid. And then what we did is have a custom fitting made, and I think the fellow said these were number 10s. Did he say number 10s? This is a number 10. So this is a number 10 male fitting with an O-ring, and so we just replicated what was the old condenser right here. And so we mounted it such that it's 90 degrees and goes across the top, and we've got exactly 3 feet of hose. And as you recall, this is out of the compressor, so this is the hot gas, and we want it to go into the top of this condenser. So we got exactly 3 feet of hose, and we had a custom-made hose with 3 feet of hose. And this is a number 8, and it goes into the top of this parallel flow condenser. And of course, it's an O-ring fitting too with a 90-degree bend. On the smaller hose, where we take out of the condenser and come back into the receiver dryer, we ran the hose underneath. Now, we're going to still tie wrap that. But you see, we ran the hose underneath to pick up our rotated, when we rotated that dryer around and put that 90-degree fitting on, we ran that one so that the fitting angles down just a little bit, and we ran it right underneath the headlight assembly, and we ran it along the bottom of the condenser radiator assembly, and we came up, if you look on the inside, we came up right there. You know, you see the radiator will still drop right down in there. So we mounted the smaller of the 2 hoses, the number 6, with the O-ring fitting down here. Now this one isn't a custom made. We already had this setup. We already had these fittings, and so we wanted to custom cut this hose to length. So that's what we did. By the way, it's exactly 3 feet long too. So each of these hoses, the number 8, the large one, the number 6, the small one, are exactly 3 feet long. And of course, we tie wrap this one to this bar by the fan, and we're going to tie wrap this one right to the bottom bracket. That's the only thing left to do, and then we'll be in good shape. The hood will close. We'll have the thing recharged out at the shop, and put the radiator back in. We'll be ready to go. I guarantee it. You'll be so satisfied. In Arizona, these things work so much better with these parallel flow condensers. They really do make better heat exchangers. Good luck.